Hey guys, I apologize. I've had some stuff happen the past few weeks, so I'm just now getting to this video. And it's just a second video in this tutorial on or series on batch. Um, this this video is going to be an actual script. It's still going to be simple, but that's okay. We'll move up to the bigger stuff soon, I promise. So in this one, we're going to be building a script that will ask for a file name, a file type, and then a directory. And then it will run and do some stuff and give you a list of everything in that directory that matches your file name and file type. So it's basically building a search for Windows in the command prompt. Uh, Blake would argue that Linux can do this natively, and that's cool, but let's talk about Windows. Let's see. The other part of it is I want to kind of walk you guys through a little bit of the thought processes that I go through when I sit down to write scripts. A lot of times, actually almost all of the time, you start out with this big, grand idea, big overview of what you want to accomplish. And if you were to try to start at that level and code everything, you would drive yourself crazy. It would be really difficult. I'm not saying you couldn't do it. I'm sure there's plenty of people that do it. But I wouldn't recommend that. So what I do is I look at the big picture, and then I start breaking down tasks within the big picture, and then I'll break down those tasks into even smaller tasks that are relatively easy to accomplish. And I do all of those, and before you know it, I put those little tasks together into the slightly bigger task, and then I put those slightly bigger tasks together and accomplish the main goal. So let's look at it. So a couple of the topics that I'm going to cover in this are going to be labels, variables, loops, and functions, but functions and labels are kind of the same things. So without me trying to get too much further into that, and there's a really loud car running behind me, let's go ahead and start by turning echo off. And it's just at echo off. Okay. Oh, and before I get too much further, I'm going to go ahead and change the language to batch in Notepad++, so it makes a little more sense. And then I'm just going to copy and paste a little bit to save some time. And what I'm copying in is going to be the main, what I'm going to call the driver of this little script. And what you've got here is a label, and then a couple of set/p lines, and then a call line, and then a go to EOF line. So main, this is the label. This tells the command window that anything under this is going to belong to main. So if I had some text up here, so what is it? Echo, this is a test line. Echo, this is a test line as well. And then if I said go to main, and then echo, this is also a test line, but you won't see it. So basically, by using this syntax, it's going to echo this line, then echo this line, and then when it gets to here, it's actually going to skip this one and go to this label and then run everything under here. So let's take this back out. And then our set/p search string, blah, 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 blah. So if I were to take this out and just do set. So basically what we're doing is we're setting a variable by not having the p in there. And because batch is weird about white space, it should set it to please. And that's not going to do us any good. But if I have the, if I have the P switch in there, this says I'm going to set
search string equal to whatever the user inputs. And I'm going to tell the user that I need them to input something by passing this string and echoing this string to them. So as you can see, I've done that 3 times. One is for the search string, so the file name that we're going to look for. And it can be a partial or a wildcard. And I'll explain how that part is implemented when we get there. The type of file, and then the directory. Now this call output search string type of file directory. And just to note, the way I'm pretty sure I touched on it in the first video, but the way you denote variables in batch is the %, around the variable name. And you might recognize this syntax from this syntax. So this is another label that we're going to build shortly. And call says that I'm going to call whatever this label is, and basically call all of the script that's under it. And then you have go to EOF. And go to EOF is not necessary per se, but it's good coding practice to make sure that all of your scripts terminate correctly. So that's, like I said, that's our main driver of this little script. Okay. So let's copy another little bit of code in here. I wish these cards would quit going by. And I've put some comments in here. And the way you comment in batch is rem and then your comment. So rem is short for remove. So at runtime, it's going to actually remove this line. Now you can also do a comment by 2 colons and then whatever the comment is. But I don't recommend this because if you're in a function, or not a, yeah, I think it's a function. It's a function or a loop, then it will not recognize this as a comment and it'll give you a bunch of problems. So let's take that out. So again, this is our label for this section of code. So we're calling it output. And then echo, you searched for $1 of type $2 in directory $3. Then I found, or echo, I found this. And then we have another function call here, or label call, we'll call it, for evaluate $1, $2, $3, and then go to EOF. So this call line is pretty much the same thing as this call line. Now, the $1, $2, and $3, if you're familiar with any other programming language, like a compiled language, you should be familiar with passing parameters to functions. And that's essentially what this is doing. And for those of you who are not familiar with parameters, if you notice, whenever I call this output line, I'm passing 3 variables. And as you might have guessed, this is where 1, 2, and 3 they correspond to 1, 2, and 3. So you search for 1, which is going to be our search string or the file name of type, and that's going to be our file type in the directory that we specified. So moving on. This is going to be pretty much the actual logic, or the only real logic in this script. And we're going to call it the evaluate label or function. Again, just a label. And now we're going to go through a loop. And then we're going to do some funky stuff here. And then we're going to actually output the file path if it matches what we're looking for. So the way this works, you have for, which is just a syntactical thing. Well, all of this is just syntactical crap. Of course, every language is different. And if you're like me, it's one of the most annoying things in the world, switching back and forth between languages. But moving forward, so you have your for loop. This /r means that we're going to recursively look through the file path, the directory that we pass in here. You could put a static directory in here, but that really wouldn't make sense with what we're trying to accomplish. So this 3, again, is the same concept that we used up here. And you can see that I'm also passing %1, %2, %3 here, which is in turn passing search string, type of file, and directory all the way down into here. So we have 4/r recursively look through this path. Then we have to give a variable name to basically how we're going to reference all of these little, all of the lines that come out of this for loop. And you don't have to start on A. It could be anything, any single letter. But I wouldn't start like on Z or something because you wouldn't have a whole lot. Actually, you wouldn't have any letters after that if we wanted to break the search string up. But that's kind of a different type of for loop, which we'll probably cover at some point. I would recommend that you do a search on for loops in batch just to kind of get an idea of what's out there. But for this purpose, for the purpose of this script, this is the one we need to use. So this is start of a variable in star. Now this basically says that we want to use any file and any file type in this directory for this loop. So after we're looping recursively through the file and we're using all file types, all files, then we're going to do this. Now, let's see. I'm trying to remember what my comments were about, but anyway, they're not important. So we're going to echo, and then we've got this funky little variable name here. Now, if I were to type, well, actually, I've got it typed right here. If I were to echo %A, this is going to give me the full file path and file type. So pretty much the entire file path of whatever file we're currently on in this recursive loop. That's useful for when we're wanting to tell somebody where the file is, the exact location. But we don't necessarily want to compare our search string and type of file with the entire file path. So what we're doing here is adding a few modifiers. And you do that with just a tilde. And then N stands for the name of the file. And then X is the extension. And then finally, we actually give it the file path we want. So I'm going to echo just the file name and file type and pipe it into the find string function. I believe the /i is ignore case, and /r says that we're going to use a regular expression. Now, if you don't know what regular expressions are, basically, kind of to oversimplify this, it enables you to search for parts of strings, and honestly, they're like stupid complicated. But let me explain what this is doing, and it might make a little more sense. So, %1 again is our search string. %2 is our type of file. So we know that the files we're looking for have to have those in there. Well, we don't necessarily know what's going to come between the file type or the file name and the file type. And something might come after it and something might come before it. And again, this is, okay, so I told you I was going to explain it. I might as well. The use period for wildcard, that's how we're able to do that, because this little, I don't know what you call it, that little combination of characters says, I'm going to search for anything in front of our file name, anything between, and anything after. So if we had a period in here, there's always a period in a file path, because that's how you denote extensions. So it's going to find the period in this string, and say that that matches what you search for because you searched for a period. And the same thing with the file type. So let's say I had a file that was on my S drive, and let's say a scripts folder that was, let's call it new index2.php. I don't know another valid extension of that. Let's do like phpx or something. I don't know if that's an actual file extension, but if I were to search for this with just index and PHP as my search criteria, it would never find it if I didn't have this in here. It will look for index and then it will look for PHP. So it look for index.php. With a search string, I can tell it, okay, I'm looking for index, doesn't matter what's in front of it or behind it. And I'm looking for PHP, doesn't matter what's in front of it or behind it. So again, that's just kind of a very basic explanation of what regular expressions are. If you want to get more involved or more in depth with that, just go ahead and Google regex or regular expressions. Again, they get very complicated, and I'm not an expert in them by any means, but they are useful. So again, we echo just the file name and file type and pipe it into the find string. We ignore case. We have our regular expression. And then we want to just pipe that into null so we don't get a bunch of garb on the screen. And now this and feature, or not feature, but this and operator. This basically says, if this was successful, then we do this. So, and again, I've just got some comments here and I don't even remember what they were for. Actually, I think I can get rid of this one. Okay. So if we found a match, then we're just going to echo the full file path. And that's pretty much as simple or as simple as this needs to be. I don't know. So if we were to run this right now, after I save it, of course. So save. Oh, gosh. Desktop. Where are my live scripts? Okay, let's just save it as search script.bat. Okay, let's open up the live scripts here. Let's run, open a command window, and it went to my other screen. So let's do search script. Let's say we want to look for index. And then let's say we want to find a PHP file, but let's just leave it at PH. And then we want to look in the S directory. It's going to sit and think about it for a minute because it's going through all of these, all of the files. And of course, some of the first files that it goes through may not actually match. Okay. I've got a lot of crap in there. Come on. You can do it. I know you can. Okay, so it's done, and that's what it found. Okay. Now, we could leave it like this. I mean, if you're happy, if this does what you need it to do, then that's fine. There are a couple of things we can do to make it a little bit better. Let's say that instead of having these search results display in a terminal, it's kind of useless if you need any kind of history or logging. Let's append it to a file. So let's say results.txt. Now, if we did one arrow, it would overwrite this results file every time. But with two, it just appends to it. Okay. So let's run it again. Open command window. Da-da-da. Index, PHP. Look in my S drive again. And of course, we're not going to see anything here because it's all going to the results file. But let's just let it run. I promise it is running. Maybe. There we go. So it's done. Now, if we open up results, now we actually have a usable list of everything that matched our search. Okay. So let's close that. Let's go back here. Let's just go ahead and take this out for right now. And then save it. Now let's make it a little bit more like a, I don't know what you'd call it, more like a real script. I don't know. Let's just add some more functionality to it because, you know, why not? So what we're going to do is after it goes through and searches everything, rather than just quitting, we're going to ask if you want to search again, then choice. Now, there are a couple of different ways to use choice, and you see I've got one commented out here. But let me open a command prompt and just kind of show you what choice does. If I type in choice, it says yes or no. And honestly, that's a really cool little feature about Bash that I didn't know about until I started writing this script, honestly. And I feel really kind of stupid for that. But anyway, that's the basic use of choice. Now, a more complex use of choice, take all this stuff out, remove this, and then let me make sure this worked because I've used code before that didn't quite transfer the way I thought it was going to. Yeah. And I don't remember what was it I had to do to fix this. I thought that worked. Hold on. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, so I goofed up a little bit, as you may have noticed. So, getting back to what I was saying, choice/C says, okay, these are the two choices I'm going to give you. /M is this is the message I'm going to give you. You have to put them in parentheses or quotation marks. Wow. Quotation marks. That was my problem. That's why it wasn't working before. So it's kind of lets you see the difference between the two. So choice, yes or no, yes, whatever. And then choice/C, SQ/M, search again, Q for quit. Probably could have just copied and pasted this, but that's okay. So now it changes what it outputs and it still gives you different options. So that's an option if you want to use it. And we'll just leave that for now. Let me move everything up here so I can see the full page. So we've got this choice. And depending on what the user presses, we're going to want to either search again or just quit the program. That's where this logic comes in. So if error level, now error level is a built-in batch variable that is set throughout various operations in the script. The long story short is that whenever we hit the first option, it sets it to 1. When we hit the second option, it sets it to 2. So if error level, and again, percent sign is equal to 1, and that's what EQU. You can't use just like the equal sign. I wish you could, but you can't. So EQ1, we're going to clear the screen, and that's what CLS does. And just to kind of see that in action, let's see, garble to goop. Now we're just going to run clear screen, and that's pretty much what it does. And that way we start over on a clean slate. And then this is the primary reason that way back here we gave our first set of instructions a label. Call main. So that's going to go all the way back up here and run everything over again. And then that way whenever we start the second search or whatever, it will ask us if we want to search again. And it'll keep doing that until we tell it to quit. And in that case, it's going to go to the end of file and terminate. So let's put it all together. Live scripts. That's what we want. I guess it wouldn't hurt to save it first, though, would it? So that live scripts. Open our command prompt here. Of course, it always goes to the other screen. Search script. Let's look for index again. PHP S. It's gonna run through and do its thing. Blah 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 blah. Come on. I know you can do it. Okay. So let's say yes, we do want to search again. So we'll give it an S, and it automatically asks us for what we want to search for. Let's say we don't know the file name we're looking for. So we'll just give that a wildcard. Let's say we want to look for HTML files in that same directory. Found a few things. And then we'll tell it to quit. And then I'm just going to close out of that. So again, that's this little search script. Now, one thing that honestly I forgot to do and kind of explain to you guys while I was doing this, but that's okay. I think now is a good time to do it too. So the way I went about figuring out how this script was going to work was I said, hey, what do I want to do? I want to create a search script that'll search through a directory and tell me, give me everything that I'm looking for. So the pieces that I broke it down to were, okay, the easiest thing, or the first thing you got to do is get the user input. Well, that's fairly simple. After I figured that, or after I did that, then my thoughts were, okay, how am I going to loop through the directory that they gave me? And I found a loop that would do that. And before I added this logic in, I echoed out just the file path. So this script, or this code, this part of the code basically looked like this initially. And I was just doing this to make sure that I could actually loop through a directory without having to compare it to anything yet. Okay. And then finally, how do I compare it to the input? And that's where this line came in. So I know that's kind of just a short rundown of how that works. But as you can see, once you break it down into its smaller parts, it's really not that complicated. I would venture to say that most of the problems that people have in batch is just figuring out the syntax, because it is annoying sometimes. But anyway, I hope you guys liked it. Stay on the lookout for part 3 of this tutorial series. I'm trying to remember what I was going to do next. It's probably going to be either a script on a ping program. I'll call it a program. It's not really a program, but basically it'll go out and ping servers or anything you want it to ping and send you an email and text message whenever it doesn't respond. So that's either going to be the next one or the one after that. I think I had one in mind for the one after this one that was different than that, but I can't remember it right now. So anyway, if you guys liked it, please like and subscribe. If not, then you know where the dislike button is at. So thank you guys for watching.